I've been low-key fascinated by clones as a sci-fi concept since I read House of the Scorpion when I was 12. I don't remember much since it's been over 20 years, but thinking about the green goo in OKKO definitely has me itching to revisit said book. So the narrative goal of the goo clones was to establish just how much farther Professor Venomous will go than Boxman does. When Venomous becomes a bigger player in Plaza attacks and presence at Boxmore, the Bodega Men expected more competent plans and attacks, but that's it. Their first encounter with Venomous involved a pie cannon. Their second encounter involved Venomous's Team Rocket theatrics, showing off his flashy car, and a mild 24-hour cold. Venomous can win, but it's never a victory that tips the status quo by much. As far as they know, Venomous is the bigger bad, but he's as low stakes and petty as Boxman. Even Venomous's other additions, like a Boxbot's mutant appendages, rely on how mean or ambitious the Boxbot himself gets. The tone is still predominantly set by Boxman and his Saturday morning cartoon antics. The KO trap follows a team chasing Daryl into Boxmore for something as low stakes as stealing back the bodega's front doors. Soon enough, they're trapped in a giant cube with no doors, seams, or obvious exit. After they tap or push certain buttons, it sets off flamethrowers, ice beams, spikes, and any number of death traps. It's one thing for KO to witness his friends dying before his eyes, but discovering the green goo adds that extra nightmarish touch. The clones were exact replicas, down to personality, memories, and experiences. They're near indistinguishable from the original Rad and Enid. And it looks like they were designed with the cruel intention of a very short shelf life the minute they enter that trap. The entire goal is that a goo clone will, inevitably, set off one of who knows how many different Minesweeper grid-placed weapons there are in the cube. KO experiences watching these clones dissolve and die at least twice. If Your World is an Illusion was wrestling with the idea behind finding purpose in life, a goo clone directly challenges how someone values life itself. Venomous is able to detach himself from the ethics and morality surrounding a living thing long enough to create a deliberately expendable, disposable being. Boxman creates sentient robots with expendable, interchangeable parts, but the bodies are the only expendable part. The bots themselves are autonomous beings with their own wants, needs, personalities, and interests. He skirts that unethical line. He's abusive and manipulative, but when he's pushed enough, he will back off or reevaluate his actions. Despite his attempts at using invalidating language like minion or robot, he does see the Boxbots as his kids and doesn't question their right to exist. Venomous figured out how to craft a sentient being with full self-awareness, cognitive function, and every definition someone could use to describe sapience. As soon as someone brings up the idea of a creature, any creature, being intelligent, it sparks discussions about how to interact with them. And the conversation doesn't stop at how to interact with them. It expands to what rights or ownership these creatures have over themselves and their environment. Enter the idea of hierarchy between humans and other animals, where humans pose themselves as superior or separate from other animals just because they're more intelligent. For example, there's pushback against farming or eating octopi because of how smart they are. They're close enough to some unspecified threshold of intelligence, they're classed in a league separate from how cows, chickens, or other livestock are treated. While there is nuance and layers to this topic, it gets even stickier when acknowledging that humans find ways to devalue and invalidate other humans. The most extreme forms of othering pop up when someone's mere existence gets challenged, demeaned, or mocked because of some immutable trait they were born with. There's Herculean efforts to justify prejudice and bigotry. I'm already opening a massive can of worms by going there at all, but I'd argue that the idea of what it means to be human rests at the heart of most science fiction or fantasy in general, no matter what media is getting discussed. To try and rein this back in, most cartoons hand-wave the ethics around creating clones and the consequences of them as sentient beings with a short-lived shelf life. That story beat can be hand-waved with the right humor or writing. This one decides to not only address that topic, but twists the knife. Venomous doesn't use any scientific jargon or clinical language when he talks about the clones. He phrases it as,
"Oh, so you got it." Using DNA obtained from previous battles, I created realistic goo clones and tricked you into watching them perish. But they weren't fake. The goo clones have your unique memories and a soul.
Those poor goo clones!
Venomous is not only aware of the ethical dilemma, but openly abuses it as a torture tool and for his own personal amusement. He doesn't feel any need to softball or obfuscate what he created or what he's doing. There isn't even a bigger motivation like crafting the perfect tailored opponent for the heroes. Venomous claims he crafted them specifically for a one-time trap and distraction. The clones show how easily Venomous ignores and bulldozes both empathy and others as full autonomous beings. It tracks that Venomous gets absorbed by his crueler, shadowy Venomous side, pushes aside Boxman, Fink, and has no qualms about using and abusing KO. What's interesting to me is that for all of Venomous's talk, there is proof that he's more empathetic and considerate than he wants to be. He's thoughtful, respectful, and careful in most of his one-on-one scenes with Fink. He tries to be a conscientious manager after his merger with Boxmore. There's very careful little scenes sprinkled around, so it's believable that Venomous can be redeemed enough to stay a permanent fixture at Boxmore post-finale. The KO trap also follows the episode KO vs. Fink. The ending of that episode was the first warning sign of Venomous losing his internal struggle with Shadowy for control. It's further reflected when PV puts up a token fight with Rad KO and Enid, but cuts the scrap short with a frustrated comment about getting a migraine. Venomous's behavior here doesn't reflect the pie cannon scene or when he set off the 24-hour cold. At his best, this man loves a pageantry, banter, and fight against heroes. In demand or not, he doesn't try to cut things short when he's honestly having fun. He plays to win. He earnestly enjoys Boxman's ongoing fight with the Plaza. So I lean into the headcanon that Venomous puffs himself up as far more evil than he really is most of the time. He's capable of going there, but the goo clones are more an extreme fringe case or backup plan rather than something center stage. The 24-hour cold is Venomous's A-game, if he's adapting Boxman's playbook to his preferences. The goal is to be the intimidating big bad, but long enough to score minor victories and hopefully get the heroes to step up a little more. Don't let them get complacent. Again, a lot of this is my interpretation or take on this character. I've spent a ridiculous amount of time trying to figure out what a post-Shadowy Venomous might look like in fanfics. Out of everything surrounding or attached to Professor Venomous in OKKO, I'm most interested in the goo clones. Even among concepts like robot reset buttons posed as a PG parallel to a Romeo and Juliet brand of suicide, the goo clones are the most extreme, visceral body horror in this cartoon. It's kind of impressive that a puddle of ambiguous green goo feels like an introduction behind what gives Cronenberg body horror weight in more complicated, deliberate horror works to me. Want a primer on effective body horror and how the moral, ethical dilemma add more weight than it has with just the gore or visuals alone? This isn't a bad place to start. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a comment and like the video. Share it, tell your friends. If you like what I'm cooking up, subscribe, ring the bell, add me to your RSS reader. If you're in a decent position and can do so or want to, I'd seriously appreciate you checking out my Patreon. I upload all my videos there too, and even if you join for free, no ads.